And so pray that they have good success up there and they make it back to us safely. Before services started, Dave was telling me about this sprinkler up here, you know, the fire sprinkler. It has these like metal ring things, and he was saying that it was a little loose, so he was trying to get a pole to like make it, you know, go back in the slot, and it just fell down. And it kind of reminded me of when I was in Vanuatu doing some mission work with some friends of mine years ago. I was sleeping, we were sleeping in these huts in the middle of nowhere, and occasionally there's like coconut trees everywhere, right? And occasionally you hear in the middle of the night, thud, thud. And then I asked them one morning, I said, does anybody ever get hit by those? And they said, oh, all the time. Somebody dies every year. And I'm like, okay. So now Dave's got me thinking the whole time I'm up here. One of these things is going to go falling down on my head, but hopefully that doesn't happen this morning. That has absolutely nothing to do with the lesson this morning, but I just wanted to share that with you because now I'm like paranoid. So if you see me looking up like this, that's why. It's not because I'm looking to God. It's because I'm making sure I'm not going to get hit in the head by the sprinkler ring. Last Sunday, I stood here and I told you about somebody that believed in you first, and I sent you home with a challenge to do something for someone else. This morning, we're starting a brand new sermon series. A brand new journey is going to begin 6 weeks, and it's called Step Up. And it goes and it opens with one question that God has been asking for 2,700 years. And he's asking it of the somebody. And that somebody is you. Before I show you the question, I have to show you a sentence, because there's a sentence every one of us says, and we say it so often we don't even hear ourselves saying it anymore. I can't count the number of times I've heard this. Somebody should do something about that. Somebody should teach those kids. Somebody should check on that widow. She's been eating alone since the funeral. Somebody should talk to that young man before he drifts all the way and is gone. Somebody should start that class. Somebody should invite that family. Somebody should fix that ministry. Somebody should mend that fence. We're a generation of world-class gap spotters. We've never been better at seeing something that needs attention. We narrate the gaps in high definition, clearly articulate them every single day. And then we file every single one of them under the same name to take care of it. Somebody. Just think of all the work that we can accomplish as a church if we just knew the elusive somebody. He's got to be out there. And here's what I've learned about somebody. He's the hardest working member of every church in America, and he doesn't exist. Somebody's never taught a class, somebody's never made a hospital visit, somebody's never knocked on one door, somebody's never cooked a meal, he's never mentored a youth, he's never taken a young mother aside and helped her, never taken a young man in to teach him how to navigate a culture that's bombarding him, saying he's toxic and terrible just because of his God-given masculinity. Because somebody is just the name we give a gap when we want it filled without it costing us anything. And meanwhile, the class goes untaught, the widow keeps eating alone, the young man keeps drifting away, and the gap just stands there, wide open, year after year after year. So here's the question I'm going to leave hanging in the air this morning. When people say somebody should, who exactly are you waiting for? What if I told you that God once ran that search himself, that heaven went looking for somebody? It's in your Bible, it happened twice. And the two endings could not have been more different. One of them gave us a prophet, and the other one gave us one of the saddest sentences in Scripture. And this morning I'm going to share both of them with you. So here's my promise to you. For the next 6 weeks, this church is going to go on a journey called Step Up. And I'm going to promise you right now, it's not a series about the elders. It's not a series about the deacons. It's not a series about the soon-to-be preacher that's going to be standing in this pulpit and people that stand up here on this stage. It's about you, your house, your pew, your street that you live on. And by the end of this morning, the very first morning, you're going to know exactly who that somebody is that you've been waiting for all of these years. And before we sing the invitation song, I'm going to put 5 words in your mouth that God has been waiting a long, long time to hear you say. Now, some of you have sharp memories, and you're already thinking, wait a second, our interim preacher has amnesia, because didn't he just preach a sermon about this guy not that long ago? Didn't he just preach this chapter from Isaiah? Well, guess right, you're right. I remember. I did. My first Sunday filling in this role in May, I preached Isaiah chapter 6. And I preached it about me, about the phone call, about the internal arguing inside my head, about why I finally said yes. Well, this morning I'm taking you back into that throne room one more time because that sermon was never finished. That morning was about my yes. And this morning is about yours. You remember the setting, right? It's about 740 BC and Judah had just been orphaned. King Uzziah had reigned for 52 years in 2 Chronicles chapter 26 and verse 3. Now, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but it's not insignificant that Uzziah had reigned for 52 years. I remember when I was a teenager or so, I can't remember the exact age, and I was reading about all of the kings of England. Have you ever noticed how many of them only reigned for like 1 or 2 years? And then usually they stopped reigning because why? Because they got killed. They died. And I remember thinking as a kid, man, who would want to be king? I mean, yeah, you get everything you want for a year or two, but then somebody chops your head off. Not sure that's the best role to fulfill. So it's very common for kings to not last very long. And every time there's a change of kings, there's always a time of instability, isn't there? Uzziah had reigned for 52 years. Judah had had some great stability for a long period of time, and now Uzziah is dead. People are all in a time of wondering, well, who's going to do this, and what's going to happen with that? How's this all going to play out? I feel this in the real estate industry all the time. Every time we have a presidential election, it's like the worst year in real estate. Because everybody, even though they're not subconsciously they're subconsciously thinking about it with their housing purchases, but they're like, oh no, what's going to happen to the economy? What's going to happen with taxes? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? And it's amazing. It's like as soon as the elections are over, out of nowhere, everybody starts calling and they want to buy a house. Why is that? Because we don't like instability. We don't like uncertainty. And even if we don't like the guy that got elected, we're just like, well, now we know what it's going to look like, and so now we're going to make a decision. Instability comes when there's transition. And Uzziah is dead after 52 years of reigning. Most people that were alive at that time had never known another king. They'd always had that same leader. And now the throne looks empty. The future looks foggy. The nation is staring into the biggest leadership gap that it's experienced in a whole generation. And in that exact year, Isaiah walks into the temple and gets the vision of his life. In Isaiah chapter 6 and verse 1, in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. Do you see it? Just think about it for a moment. The people of Judah, when they look, they're looking at the throne, and they think it's empty, don't they? Because Uzziah is dead. But did you notice what Isaiah sees? He sees the Lord sitting on his throne. The very year the earthly throne was empty, God pulled the curtain back on the throne that has never been empty. Seraphim are calling out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts." Foundations are trembling. The temple is filling with smoke. Hear this before anything else this morning. Every gap you are grieving sits underneath a throne that has never once been vacated. In front of all of that holiness, Isaiah falls apart. He says in chapter 6 and verse 5, "Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live amongst a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Mark this, because this whole series lives right here on this. The first thing a called man feels is disqualified. His first words were not "send me." His first words were "woe is me." And that whisper is the same one that has kept some of you glued to your seats for years. Who am I to teach? Who am I to lead? You don't know what these lips have said. Well, actually, because of social media, we do. God knows this, and He already has a plan for that. Heaven does something about that. In chapter 6, verses 6 through 7, then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar with tongs. And he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven. Church, do you remember holding a coal in this room? Some of you remember eating it. And a few weeks ago, we spent a whole series learning what God does with broken, trapped, weighed down people. We held a coal and said broken doesn't mean destroyed. And I want you to see this morning why God does it in that order. He cleanses before He commissions. He doesn't recruit you and then hope you clean up. He takes the coal from His own altar and touches the dirtiest things about you and says, taken away, forgiven, first. The entire series was the coal, which means for this church, there's only one thing left, the question. In chapter 6 and verse 8, then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Now watch this carefully, because it's not exactly what you'd expect. God does not point. He does not draft. He doesn't even call Isaiah by name, and he knows his name. He asks a room, an open question, hanging in the smoke. Whom shall I send? As if heaven is waiting to see if anyone will move. And a man with fresh burned lips doesn't even wait to hear the job description. He doesn't wait until someone drafts the full proposal. Then I said, here am I, send me. Do you realize he said yes before the assignment was announced? Well, what about the details? How much of my time is this going to require? How many days of the week? Is this going to cost me anything? Before he saw the full proposal, before he read the fine print, before he received the entire PowerPoint presentation, he said yes. Go read it. The mission brief doesn't come until verse 9. Isaiah didn't weigh an offer. He didn't ask about the hours or the compensation or the odds of success. A cleansed man heard an open question and simply could not stand the thought of a gap going unfilled. One question from the throne, one hand in the air, and because of that answer, you and I have the book of Isaiah on our laps this morning. The prophet who saw the suffering servant 700 years before Bethlehem, who penned those beautiful words about Jesus before he was ever born. 150 years later, same God, same kind of moment, a nation rotting from the inside out, a gap crying for someone to stand in it, and this time God says this through the prophet Ezekiel. In Ezekiel chapter 22 and verse 30, I searched for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand in the gap before me for the land, so that I would not destroy it. But I found no one. Sit in that for a minute. The God of heaven went searching, hoping to find someone personally. Through the princes, he found no one. Through his priests, he found no one. Through his prophets, he found no one. He wasn't looking for a hero or someone with a fancy title. He wasn't looking for a resume. He was looking for a man, one person, willing to just stand in the gap. And the verdict of heaven over an entire generation came back with 2 words. Not somebody, no one. In the very next verse, the judgment falls, and the city's fate is sealed. I encourage you this week, go read what happens next to God's people, because there wasn't somebody. Isaiah's generation heard the question, and somebody, Isaiah, stood up, and the world got a prophet. Ezekiel's generation heard the same question, and everybody waited for somebody, and they got ruins. I want you to think about that. Ezekiel's generation heard the same question and kept waiting for somebody, and they got ruins. But church, Ezekiel's generation is not the pattern of this book. Because all through your Bible, when God calls, somebody answers. Just listen to them. Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, God told an old man to leave everything he'd ever known. And he walked out with no map, no address, and years later, on the darkest morning of his life, when God called him his name on the mountain, he answered with one word, "Here I am." Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3, a little boy lying in the dark of the tabernacle hears his name called in the night. A child answers what a nation of grown men wouldn't. He said, "Speak, for your servant listens." And he never stopped listening for the rest of his life. Or David in 1 Samuel chapter 17, an entire trained army hid in their tents for 40 days while a giant roared at them. And a teenage shepherd boy with a sack lunch walks up to the king and said, listen to this, "Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." Everybody saw the gap, but it took a kid with stones to step into it. Or how about Ananias in Acts chapter 9? An ordinary disciple in Damascus, no title, no official office, hears the Lord call his name in a vision. And he says this, "Here I am, Lord." And then walks through the front door of the most dangerous house in the city to lay hands on Saul, the man who would come and arrest people. And he calls him brother. Remember, the murderer Paul's eyes were blind. And Ananias very well could have said, "Hey, God, I'm not going in there. Go get somebody else." But he didn't. Or what about Philip in Acts chapter 8, who pulled out of a citywide revival and sent to an empty desert road of all places, and the Bible gives him the shortest resume of obedience ever written. It says in chapter 8 and verse 27, "So he got up and he went. He ran to one chariot, taught one traveler, baptized him in roadside water, and the gospel message of Jesus rode its way into Africa." Do you hear it? An old man, a little boy, a shepherd kid, 2 church members nobody famous had ever heard of. Not one of them held a title when they answered. Not one of them was asked twice. God called, and boom, 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 through the centuries, they answered. Somebody kept standing in the gap. And every single time somebody stood up, God moved. Every single time somebody stood up and stood in the gap, God moved. 2 kinds of generations in this book. The kind where somebody answers, and the kind where God comes back from the search saying, "I found no one." And the question is still open this morning. It's hanging in the air right now over every gap you narrated in your head 20 minutes ago. The untaught class, the lonely widow, the drifting young man, your own dinner table. God is not waiting for the mythical somebody, church. He's looking at you. So write this down. Here's the whole series in one sentence. Leadership isn't a title that you wait to be assigned to you. It's a gap you step into. Nobody's going to hand you a badge. Nobody's going to draft you. Nobody's coming to make it official. There's just a gap and a question and your 2 feet. So here's what we're going to do. The next time you hear yourself saying, somebody should, I want this room to already know the answer when I say it. Somebody should, and you say, I'm the somebody. So let's practice it. Somebody should. That was pathetic. All right, let's try again. Somebody should. Much better, but let's try harder. Ready? Somebody should. All right, we're going to keep working on this. And careful now, you all don't know if you just realized it, but you just volunteered in front of witnesses. Now, some of you have already noticed something's different this morning. Joe already pointed it out. 5 times in a row, the church walked out of here holding something: a coal, a coin, a rock, a race bib. So you may be eyeing the back door thinking, is he going to pull something at the last minute? No, not today. Nothing. Empty hands. And that's not an oversight. That's the sermon. Because the whole point of this morning is something's missing. The gap is empty. And so are your hands. So here's your assignment instead, your challenge. Sometime today, before your head hits the pillow, you take out a piece of paper, and I want you to finish the sentence. Somebody should fill in the blank. Write the gap, the real one. The one you've been narrating for months. You know that one. It came to your mind 20 minutes ago. It's still sitting there, a gap unfilled. Then I want you to take out your pen and cross out the word somebody and write your own name over the top of it. And then this week, you take one step into that gap. Not the whole ministry, not the finished product, just one simple step. Sign up, make the call, knock on the door, show up. Walk up to one of our elders and say 4 words that will change your year. I'll take that one. How can I help? Because somebody should, and I'm the somebody. And keep those hands empty until next Sunday, because next week, God's got a question about what's in them. But before we stand and sing, you need to hear where this story finally goes. Because Ezekiel chapter 22 and verse 30 is not actually the end of it. God said, I found no one. And heaven refused to leave it there. Because there was one gap that no volunteer could ever fill. Not Isaiah. His own lips were unclean until the coal came. Not Abraham, not Samuel, not David. Every one of them had a gap of their own. The gap between a holy God and a sinful people like you and me. The gap ran through every human heart that ever offered to stand in it. No prophet could fill it. No priest, no parent, and no preacher. So the God who went searching decided to come himself. Jesus stepped down into one gap that would have destroyed us all. And he stretched out his arms between heaven's justice and your soul. And he held the position all the way to death and through it. The only reason anybody in this room gets the privilege of filling a gap is because God already filled the gap for you. Jesus already volunteered on your behalf. If it weren't for Jesus, there would be no stopping any of the gaps. So here's what we're going to do this week and every single week of this series. Every Sunday for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to end the sermon the very same way with the question God asked in the smoke. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I want to teach you Isaiah's answer, 5 words. Before you say them, you need to know something about these 5 words. I've already said them to you from this pulpit in May, standing right here, brand new to this role, with a phone full of very good reasons to say no. I said, here am I, send me. And I meant them. And it cost something. And I would stand here and say them all over again this morning. But it's now your turn. It's your turn to say these words. Here am I, send me. Learn those 5 words. carry them all summer. And by the end of this series, they're going to be the most dangerous prayer that you may know. And for the record, the first time I said mine, it took a text from a friend who pushed me over the line. And some of you just need an Adam this morning. And some of you, God is asking you to be the Adam. And for some of you, the very first gap you need to step into is your own. And here's the paradoxical irony of it. You can't step into it, only Jesus can. And he already has. And you just need to step towards him so that he can fill the gap. You've never actually answered God's call at all. You've never been buried with him in baptism. You've never repented of your sins. You've never confessed him as Lord. You've never put your full trust and belief in him. You've never gone down into those waters to come up cleansed, the way that heaven's coal cleansed Isaiah's lips before he ever said a word about going. Hear the order one more time, because it's the order of the whole Bible. Cleansed first, commissioned second. You don't get yourself ready and then come. You come and he makes you ready. And this morning you have an opportunity for God to do that for you. God is asking us one more time this morning, whom shall I send and who will go for us? Here am I, send me. If you're here this morning and you're in need of responding to the Lord's invitation, this is your opportunity to do so. To stand in the gap, to allow Jesus to stand in the gap for you, or if Jesus has already stood in the gap for you and it's time for you to stand up, now's the time to come forward while we stand and while we sing.